we're going to cover the resistance in Gaza from the very southern point, southeast Rafah, all the way to the north in Jabaliya. So we'll just show you a map here so people can get a sense. The map on the left there, that's Rafah in red. That's the area. Well, Rafah is all across the bottom of that map. The blue is the area where the Israeli military has pushed in. That is mostly not built up area. It's farm field. And it's, of course, the Rafah crossing is now closed, as Nora reported. But they're pushing in on the eastern edge of Rafah. And on the map on the right, you could see 𝐓𝐡𝐴 corridor dividing the Gaza Strip. There's reports today that the Americans are going to be attaching the pier at the end of 𝐓𝐡𝐴 corridor in the next 24 hours. Believe it when I see it. But that's the plan. And then there's fighting in Zaytun in Gaza City, the third invasion of Zaytun. The Israelis keep saying they win, and then they keep having to go back in and fight. And they've been fighting for the last week in Zaytun. They left Zaytun today. And then there's major fighting in Jabaliya in the camps and in the city of Jabaliya on the eastern edge of Jabaliya, all the way out to the border is fierce fighting. That's been happening. And this is all in the context. I always want to do this before I get into the resistance, is just to underline the humanitarian catastrophe that we're witnessing. 500,000 people on the move under conditions that are much more difficult than when they moved the first time in October and November, when we called it a virtual death march because of how brutal the march was for people to walk those tens of kilometers to the new place where they were going to set up. In some cases, 𝐄𝐿 𝐄𝐿, in some cases, Rafah. But this time we're adding the ruins. They have to move through the ruins, the famine that is gripping Gaza. Just basic things like dehydration and exhaustion make it really difficult to pack up your cloth and wood tent and carry it with your family, aged 2 to 80 years old. And people are injured. There's a catastrophic level of serious injuries in Gaza, more than 100,000 people with serious injuries. And so this is just really devastating, this attack on Rafah and the moving of 1.5 million, 1.4 people, 700,000 children out of Rafah into where? The ruins of 𝐄𝐿 𝐄𝐿, the packed middle camps there where you see Deir al-Balah. There's no room in these places for people to set up. This is just a catastrophe. And it's a systematic genocide that we have been covering every day now we're into the 8th month. Israel carries out 150 airstrikes a day right now, tens of thousands of artillery shells, and that's the context within which the resistance takes place. So let's look at number one, because we watched last week the Israelis mustering on the border. Qassam hit them with rockets, mass casualty event at their staging area outside of Rafah. This is IDF footage showing us those tanks that were stationed in that staging area beginning the move into Rafah. Interestingly, though, they have split themselves off. The divisions that were positioned to go into Rafah, only one of the divisions went in, and the other two divisions moved up into the north. They moved into Zaytun and they moved into Jabaliya. So while the U.S. is still talking about the Rafah invasion as separate from what we're seeing in Rafah right now, it is possible that what the Israelis are saying it's a precise operation, a precise raid, rather than the takeover and attempted occupation of Rafah, which would require a force posture that we're not seeing right now from the Israelis. That can always change very quickly. That division from Zaytun can move down. But Rafah is a logistically challenging place for Israel to occupy in comparison to the other places in Gaza that they've been fighting so far. There's a long border with Egypt. It's more than twice the width of anywhere else in Gaza. That stretches supply lines for the Israelis, stretches their supply lines. Rafah is a spread out, sprawling town. And so there's a lot of ground to cover. And so here we see these tanks. They're moving in on the eastern edge of Rafah. And immediately we got a flood of resistance reports. 30 resistance reports on the first day. That's more reports than at any time since December, when there was a full-scale war all over the Gaza Strip. And every day since then, the number has increased. And so the resistance is showing the capacity to not only continue to fight, but actually to escalate that fight. And each day escalate from the day before, let alone escalating from the 7 months of ground war that we've been witnessing. So those are important things to point out, because as soon as these tanks arrived, we see a fighter here emerging from a tunnel right in the area that we saw those tanks. We see a 𝐓𝐿 troop carrier that doesn't have an active protection trophy system to defend itself. And you see a Yasin strike from a 𝐓𝐿𝐿𝐿 shooter who emerges from the ground and hits directly on the troop carrier. These kind of tunnel operations, we're going to see them throughout this show. And it's one of the reasons why when the war started, the Israelis said there was 500 kilometers of tunnels. And then as the war carried on, they said there was 700 kilometers of tunnels. And now I heard on the BBC, the IDF said yesterday that there's 1,000 kilometers of tunnels, because these tunnels are in their nightmares. Everywhere they go, fighters pop up, can hit them, and then return to their bases safely. These are not martyrdom missions, as I've pointed out throughout this war. These operations are carried out by fighters who are returning to their bases with the skill set, with the experience to carry on the fight. And we're seeing that. We've seen that all through the war. So we'll just watch this one last. Okay, we'll go to this one, because there's so many today, guys. We have to keep them moving. So this is in Rafah. We're going to watch a cameraman and a shooter moving through their neighborhood. The Rafah brigade has been waiting for 7 months for this battle. They're prepared for it. They know the area. They know the terrain. They can set up minefields. They can set up frontline defenses. They can set up shooting positions like this. This is their neighborhood. They know the landscape. And that is a major advantage for the guerrillas at all times. This is a tank being hit with, apparently has a command flag on that tent, on that tank. You could see it at the top of that one. So you could see them just moving through, again, carefully moving through the undergrowth, tight to the buildings. We're still seeing the fighters being extremely careful of the drones that are in the air constantly. And knowing the landscape in their own neighborhoods allows them to get around, to get shots like this at a distance there that we watched it hit that 𝐓𝐿 troop carrier from a distance that's too close for the active protection system to properly kick in. So this is the third one against the tank. And you can see that's often that flag is a command flag or some sort of flag signaling a lead tank in a convoy. And then you see the fighter return to his base through the tunnel at the end of that clip there. So if we go to number 2, this is a 𝐓𝐿𝐿𝐿 fighter in a tunnel here. They're going to fire on this troop position. The Israelis move into the troop position. 𝐓𝐿𝐿𝐿 has surveillance right on top of them, literally in the next building. The Israelis believe that building is safe, and they get a thermobaric warhead from a Yasin targeting him. This fighter says, he salutes his commanders and he says, "We say to Netanyahu, who promises to enter Rafah, we are here waiting for you, preparing for you many varieties of your death. This is just the tip of the iceberg. A short while ago, we hit a special force squad in a building, the one we just saw. And now we will hit a Merkava tank." And here they go, as promised, hitting the Merkava tank. That's actually a 𝐓𝐿 troop carrier, but he could be forgiven for that. But just like he said in the tunnel, calling his shot. And this is the first day that the Israelis are inside Rafah, feeling the resistance in Rafah that has been laying in wait for them for 7 months for this battle. If we go to number 4, we have a variety of, as he said, a variety of death options. This is Qassam machine gun fire at another Israeli troop position that's right across the street. So they have surveillance on the building right across the street. And we could see machine gun fire. We pull out the audio always of these videos, but heavy machine gun fire, which is something we haven't actually seen tons of in these videos. The videos often take we see sniper rifles, but this kind of small arms fire and PK machine gun fire isn't something we see all the time. So it's interesting to see it in Rafah in the first stages of the battle, because these are obviously fighting positions that they knew the Israelis were going to come into. And they have all different types of operations prepared for them in these areas. And you can see the emptying of the clip there. And in number 6, we were watching a mortar team here operating. And this fighter also has a message. He's got his hand on his heart, and he says, "From under the bullets and the sounds of planes and cannons, we send 2 messages, a message of a threat and a message of steadfastness. The message of a threat is to Netanyahu and his forces. As for the message of steadfastness, it is to our people, our loved ones, to our nation who are displaced from their homes and suffering hardships. My message to you is to be steadfast, to be patient and persevere, because as you sacrifice, we also sacrifice in the name of the homeland." This is them saying what they've said throughout the war, that we fight in the same trench as our people. And he's very eloquently making this point while under drone surveillance, getting ready to launch his Qassam makes 3 mortars, 60 millimeter, 81 millimeter, and 120 millimeter mortars. He looks like he's got 81 millimeter mortars there. It's sending a message to his people, something that we see in these videos. And I always pull the videos where they have these messages to their people, because I think that it shows the many layers of complexity of the national liberation struggle. They obviously make these statements for a reason. And so although the mortar teams get sort of short shrift in these video reports, because there's a lot of them, and all you can really see them do is load it and fire. And so whenever there is more reports from the field, I always cut the mortar teams out of them and the rocket teams out of them. And as I've said before, I'll have to apologize to the artillery units, because they're the core part of this battle all throughout. They have been since the year 2000, when these mortar teams were critical to the anti-settlement strategy that Qassam carried out to attack with mortars the Israeli settlements inside Gaza and Israeli army positions inside Gaza, in order to ultimately drive them out of Gaza in 2005, as the Israelis did the so-called disengagement, where they uprooted their settlements and pulled their settlers and soldiers out of Gaza. So that was 7 mortar teams right there operating. And a few hours later, the IDF acknowledged 8 casualties from mortar fire on the Rafah crossing, where the Israelis are blocking the crossing. 2 𝐓𝐻 special forces soldiers were killed in those mortar attacks. And now we have the one everyone was waiting for, I think. This is number 37 here tomorrow. We're watching an unbelievable complex ambush here. We're watching 3 fighters emerge from a tunnel in the middle of an IDF base where they believe that they're safe. We're seeing 2 𝐄𝐥𝐞 EFPs, explosively formed penetrators, devastating anti-tank weapons. We're watching him come out of the tunnel 10 feet away from the tank, picks up his 𝐄𝐥𝐞, carries it directly to the tank. Now they're showing us the second fighter emerging from the same tunnel with his 𝐄𝐥𝐞. And watch this. You can see an Israeli soldier right there. So he walks in behind the soldier, and then he's right there at the back door of the Merkava tank. And you can see the distance that he places it at. He's placing it at that distance so that the shape charge of the explosively formed penetrator has time to fully form and hit. So what we're watching is brave, but we're watching something that is complex, it's tight, it's precise, and it's executed perfectly by the fighters. So yes, it's brave. A lot of comments about various body parts of steel these guys have. But really, if you watch this operation, when it loops back around, that's the medevac helicopter taking them wounded away. Everybody's wounded. The Israelis never say anyone dies. But watch this. They come out of the tunnel in the middle of the base. One guy goes he knows exactly where he's going. He's not putting this in some random spot. He's not pointing it at the tank in any different place. He knows when he emerges from this tunnel that he is going to go to the back door of the first Merkava tank, the second 𝐄𝐥𝐞 carrier. He's aiming it at the armored personnel carrier. You can see him there. He just got up from the tunnel and he's picking up the device. He walks it directly to the back door. He doesn't place it on the side where there's also vulnerabilities. The weakest point of the armor on the tank is the back door. It's also where the soldiers are inside. You blow that door off and you have a crew of 4 and probably 4 other infantry soldiers in the tank at any given time. And then you see a third guy who comes up with a Yasin 105 and fires it at the Namr troop carrier on the other side. Each person knows when they come up that tunnel what move, what decision, where they're going. We'll watch it one more time just because there's so many things to point out in this. You can watch on this next time through the ability to get up through this tunnel. That tunnel is dug despite the fact that the Israelis have tilled that soil, turned it all up, believing that they have covered over and can put their vehicles there because they've buried the tunnels. But it's actually the opposite. They loosen the till and it makes it easier for the fighters to emerge from their tunnel spot. The tunnels have offensive tunnels, defensive tunnels, strategic tunnels, logistics tunnels, and the difference of them is by closing a door. And so when these fighters, let's focus now on their return to the tunnel, because these fighters are, again, returning to their base safely. So he sets the device, pulls the pin there. He's got something like 6 seconds. We took out the audio, but it goes off. The second guy pulls his, the third shooter comes out, and then all 3 of them pile down into the tunnel, and there they are walking away under the tunnel. And you can hear in the audio of this video, if you go to my Twitter account, the full videos are there. You can hear the audio in the video. You could hear the second 𝐄𝐥𝐞 explode as they're underneath the ground, getting away safely. Again, fighters returning to their base safely. Let's just do it one more time because it's our show. So there's the first 𝐄𝐥𝐞. There's the second 𝐄𝐥𝐞. The fighters emerge from the tunnel as if it's easy to do. It's not. They have to get up, climb up out of the land. They have to not be seen. You'll notice that 𝐶𝐿 puts the good guys in green and the red triangles. So you see the good guys there in green. We'll see that throughout this. I mean, we've seen it throughout the war, but particularly there, the bad guys are red. That soldier, oblivious to what's going on, it's surely killed by the second 𝐄𝐥𝐞. You can see the distance from the back door. That's the perfect distance for maximum destruction from that device. The 𝐄𝐥𝐞 is a explosively formed penetrator that has been built by the Qassam brigades and developed over 25 years. There's something like 50 versions of them till they perfected to the point that they are now. And so that tunnel operation is really remarkable. And those kind of tunnel operations are why the IDF went from saying there was 500 kilometers of tunnels to 750 to 1,000. And in their nightmares, there's 2,000 kilometers of tunnels in their nightmares. So let's go to 38 for here tomorrow because there's more from Rafah. So you're watching here an elevated shooter. You can watch the Yasin warhead travel in this shot. If you watch the left side of the screen here, you can see it. Qassam's going to show it to you in a freeze frame. Okay, so here the fighter is these fighters are under a building. They're under a building, so they're below ground. They're climbing up the tunnel to the main floor. and then they're climbing the stairs in order to get an elevated firing position. It's this one where you can see the warhead. I mixed them up. You'll see the warhead flying through the air from the elevated position on this one. There it is there. Green for the good guys. Again, they point, they're green. So what you have is a three-dimensional attack here. Fighters who are down under the ground protected, coming up to the first floor to the surface level and passing on the surface level because it's more militarily effective to fire on an elevated firing position. So you're seeing Qassam in just this attack use 3 dimensions on the battlefield, something that we've talked about throughout this war that they do. They're able to move between buildings with the tunnel network that they have built. And especially in Rafah, in a place like that has been waiting for these months for this battle, they can use these tunnels and the destruction. Like, just look at the destruction, right? Rafah has been subjected to attack for this entire war, even though it's called in the BBC a safe zone or whatever. We all know it's not. Dr. Khalid talked about how it's not that, clearly not that. We'll let this one go one more time because you could watch just how significant it is. Military colleges will study this kind of warfare because we're watching fighters come from below ground and then end up above ground. And so you effectively are firing from the position of where an aircraft would be in terms of below surface level and firing from the air. And you can see the way the elevated firing position in this video, you can see how it provides you the angle to come down on top of the armored vehicle that is roughly hidden. That vehicle believes that that's a tank, that it believes that it's hidden behind that. And if they were firing from the ground level, it would be hidden. But they go from the tunnel, climb up, past the first floor, into the upper floors, and are firing from the upper floors. Here they're using the alleyways and ruins, which is something that they, of course, have always been doing in this battle. The Israelis' wanton destruction has no military purpose. It's military vandalism, and it makes it easier for the fighters to move. It gives them more concealment. It actually hides their tunnels because it's dropping the entire building down on top of the tunnel, which makes it difficult for Israel to go find the tunnel, which they basically stopped doing in December. But here, this video here, we're in the tunnel with the fighters. This is a fighter holding a detonator where he's going to detonate the tunnel entrance here. And he says, and then they detonate the entrance where the soldiers are, and they go down the tunnel, and they find, the fighter says, they sent their robots into the tunnel, and here it is in our hands. So what would happen if they sent their soldiers? So this is Qassam holding an explosive ordnance disposal robot, a bomb disposal robot that's supposed to deactivate explosives. You've probably seen them above ground. They often have guns on them that try to neutralize the explosion. Not sure what this one has. But detonating the tunnel entrance. So the tunnels are used for offensive reasons when they use it to climb the stairs to get to the top floor. They use it to pop out and put Shawaz devices right beside a tank. And here they're using the tunnel to lure the Israeli force into the tunnel and blow up part of the tunnel. And the way the tunnel network works, it's like a spider web. So you block one, if you can turn an attack tunnel into a mass casualty event by blowing up a piece of the tunnel, but they have those thick, heavy doors that we've seen throughout the war. They close those heavy doors, and you're just blowing up one section of a spider web. You're not destroying the tunnel. So the tunnels can be used in these ways. The Israelis haven't even got to mapping this kind of thing yet. So we don't know for sure exactly how detailed it is, but we've watched them do these kind of attacks where they turn an offensive tunnel into a mass casualty by blowing up the entrance. And you don't lose that tunnel by blowing up the entrance because you have a spider web that you can access the other channels of the tunnel through various different ways, like a spider web. So that's Rafah. Rafah there's more videos from today that we'll show you next week, but that's the last 3 days in Rafah. And those were pretty remarkable videos, even having covered these videos throughout the war. Those videos were remarkable.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit like, leave a comment. These engagements help us with the YouTube algorithm, and it helps us to get around Silicon Valley censorship as much as possible. It does make a difference. You can also support our journalism by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking on donate now. Thank you.